Jake's a bit more of a warrior this time, so I wanted to give him a bit more of an animalistic feel. He's not necessarily as human as he was 10 years ago. He has adapted, so it gave me an opportunity to kind of put that feral nature into Jake, to distance himself from being the guy in the wheelchair from the first film. I know that what Jim is trying to create is very truthful, very emotional and grounded tales of the tribulations of a family and what it means to be in a family, and putting them in the most dire of situations, in a humongous intergalactic war, filled with exploitation and themes that are almost operatic. And at the heart of it, though, is, as I said, a family unit, a family trying to survive, a family trying to get through the teenage years, a marriage trying to hold itself together. I think Jake and Neytiri is the ultimate love story. I think it showed you in the first movie, it didn't matter whether you were, what race you were, what planet you were, what color you were from, love is love. And I think it forges, the first film and the battle that they undertook forged an unbreakable bond between them. It gets tested, just like any marriage. It gets tried like any kind of relationship under duress. But I think that, Neytiri is Jake's world. That's the world that he found. That was without a doubt the most difficult thing I've ever done. I've been in this industry 20 years, and that's the hardest I've ever had to work. It's scary, it's intense, the time triples by 3 when you're dealing with water on any movie, but more so on this. And you're actually then having to make it look easy and seamless because the Na'vi and the Metkina learn to breathe underwater. Zoe and me were always just very close. I think we both didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into. And that gave us absolute freedom in the first movie to just bounce off each other and enjoy the ride. I think that she's now have several children. I've had several children. We've seen some side of the industry that we like and don't like. And then when we get back into this world, it's like putting on a great new, an old pair of gloves. It's easy.
I can't believe all this lives in his head. I can't believe he conceived this. I can't believe he brings this crew of brilliant minds and we all drink the Kool-Aid, and then we're like, yeah, man, I'll stay up. I'll spend time away from my family. I'll travel everywhere with you, and I'll try to figure this out because Pandora needs to come back to life again. She's marvelous. To watch her is like, it's such a work of art. You're watching like a flower unfold, and all of a sudden you get with her on set, and you do not recognize that you are talking to a woman that is 5'10", that has walked this earth for decades before you and has made her mark and her presence be known. She is 14, she is vulnerable, she is a child, she's rebellious. She is scared, she is brave, she is Kiri. Everything about Kiri, it's Sigourney. Jim had a lot more to deal with. And there was a lot more pressure that was on him, that fell on him. And he was also putting on himself. There's 3 times as many characters, more characters. The world is bigger. The stakes are higher. It was such an amazing thing. I couldn't believe that was the training that we were doing for a movie. It made it more than a movie. It was fun. It was always scary at the end of the day when I would leave the tent as I was driving home. I would go, I can't believe I was 20 feet under. I equalized and I was just holding my breath for over 2 minutes. Like I can't believe I'm doing that. What inspires me about Neytiri is the fact that she is a creature that is living in a world where having to be a feminist doesn't exist. It doesn't process through the minds of any males or any females. I liked that because I was never really playing the empowerment of her. I was just playing her essence. I like to believe that we can finally one day get to be in a world where women do not have to actively empower themselves, but that is just like a birthright that nobody thinks of ever touching, So that's what I love the most about her.
I remember having lunch with Jim, and he started to talk about this kind of forest girl who could communicate with the animals and with the plants, who had a special gift of connection with living things, and who had perhaps eventually a strong connection with Awa. And I loved the idea of this character. And then he said, well, and she's going to be about 14. And I said, oh. And he said, and you and I know how immature you are, so I think you can handle this. Zoe and I had a lot of fun because, you know, she would say, you know, you really need to, as the Na'vi woman, you need to, you know, conduct yourself like this. And, you know, she'd say to my brothers, take care of Kiri. And I'd be like, what? No one has to take care of me, you know, and I'd be like, just like, you know, just like you would be. And I'd stomp around instead of being a graceful Na'vi. And, you know, it's all just kind of, you know, we're actors, so it just all kind of tumbles out. You're not planning any of this stuff. But we had some good laughs about that. And of course, Zoe and Sam have such little children, and they're used to sweet children, you know. Suddenly they have these teenagers who are so moody and unpredictable. I remember when Jim said, he said, oh yeah, you're gonna have to hold your breath for about 3 or 4 minutes. And I said, Jim, I can't hold my breath for 30 seconds. And he said, you'll be able to. And I thought, oh, this is just Jim. And yet at the first lesson that Kirk gave us, I held my breath for 1.5 minutes. And I thought, wow, what is this? And it just shows you how little we know about our systems and what they can do. I can't imagine any other filmmaker being able to create this from top to bottom with so much detail and bring you so into that world, you know, to create so many stories at once, which is one of the things I admire about Jim. Jim, the storyteller, doing this sort of, you know, coming of age movie that was also a great love story that was also, and perhaps most importantly, the story of these two worlds colliding. I have had to work completely differently than I ever have before, because you do have to strip away all of that, you know, Sigourney Weaver, whoever that is. And it's been kind of an amazing experience to go back in time and be with that person every day. And it's been quite an incredible year.
In the entire performance, in performance capture, it's a great. I've just enjoyed learning the necessities, the techniques, the limitations, you know, the opportunities that it presents. Just trying to learn this new. This is acting is it's a new component to acting, and I think you know, in the way that we're making movies are being made now, I think it's it's an important one to know. And so I feel like I'm experiencing it at the highest level here. His DNA was taken, as was some of the other Marines, RDA Marines. And the decision was made to go ahead and try to put that Marine sort of consciousness, to bring him back. And in a way, it's a fulfillment of this sort of dream scenario that he has in the first film when he says to Sam, you know, a Marine consciousness in an Avatar body, that's a potent mix. And I don't think he had any conception at the time that he would end up that way.
There's a vendetta, aspect to what's going on, and that vendetta is against Jake Sully, and the reason for that vendetta is because he feels that he has been betrayed by someone who is supposed to be a brother to him, and somebody he showed tremendous loyalty to, and somebody who he afforded opportunity to, and as far as he's concerned, Sully basically spit in his eye and turned his back on him. If you said, give me one word about Avatar, you wouldn't be wrong if you said family. Concerned to Jim, I think it's a choice that comes from the heart for him, which also happens to be a very canny choice. It's just an expansion of the original themes of the film, which had to do with oneness and, you know, kind of the unity of a planet, the oneness that we feel with it.
What I love, though, about Jim deciding to put the actors in the water is that Jim does have, and I don't know any other person in my life like this, Jim does seem to have a sort of an inherent belief that humans can be capable of almost superhuman things sometimes, as he is. I mean, we've all seen it. But he also believes that everyone can push themselves just that little bit further than they ever believed that they were prepared to. And I love seeing him encourage people to go that extra mile and try that new experience that they were afraid of or daunted by. And luckily for me, I wasn't daunted by any of it. But if it weren't for Jim saying, you know, you could do all this water stuff if you want to. I mean, we could always get the stunt people to do it. I'm like, do you know me? Of course I'm going in the water. So it really has been it's just been fantastic, sort of mind-blowing, really. I would have been such a fool to have said no, and actually Jim and I, we have sort of talked over the years about trying to come up with something to do together, find an opportunity to work together again, and I obviously, really loved the first film. I was one of those people who, it really got me. I really understood all the subtle and not so subtle themes that ran through it, and I found it very powerful and extremely emotional. And so I was just thrilled when he said, look, we've got to get you big and blue. And it is remarkable how much is being picked up in terms of your physical movements, and how, I mean, we walk in a particular way. You know, the Na'vi don't walk just like a regular human being. There's a sort of a composure to it, and a real strength and a groundedness. They walk in a very fluid way with their legs. They almost lead with their hips. The shoulders are very upright. It's different, you know, not kind of like a slouchy human who probably doesn't think about how they're holding themselves when they walk down the street. And the tiniest adjustments to that Na'vi gait, it's really, you see it immediately, the difference from one take to the next. I'd watch and I go, oh God, I forgot to do my walk. And then you correct it and it makes the most enormous difference to the character. So learning to appreciate the subtleties of movement has been really great, actually. Yeah, really interesting. So the underwater performance capture, first of all, it's a huge amount to think about. So there's not just the physical challenge of holding your breath. There's then the added challenge of acting out a scene underwater where everything is very different. You're having to imagine coral reefs. You're having to picture, you know, other Na'vi, Metcaina swimming around you. And often acting with a child who is in actual fact a safety diver who's 35 years old and not a 9-year-old girl. So there's that sort of added element too. Then you have the challenge of your movements are very, very different underwater. So rather than sort of sculling all the time or desperately trying to kick your legs to sort of stay in one place, finding that serenity and that calm, that's another thing. So there's all of that to take care of first. Then you have a wetsuit with motion capture bobbles all over you. Then you have a helmet and an arm with a GoPro sat in the front of it.
And it's not like we're starting from scratch. I mean, we were doing water simulations back on Titanic, but it's taking it not just to the next level, but up 5 levels. You know, if we started 5 or 6 years ago with our study of water and our quantification of it and how we create these simulations, we had to future-proof ourselves for 5, 6, 7 years down the line, you know, to be ahead of the curve now, right now, today, as we're finishing the film. So I'd say water was the biggest problem, and that's something we knew going in. That was going to be our challenge. But the beauty of it is if you can solve water for this movie, which we've done, which Weta has done, and we worked with them to do it, you never have to look back. You never have to worry about it again. You can do all water anytime until the end of time, right? So these tools become incredibly important to the effects industry at large. So the actors are in a very pure process. Some of them have likened it to, black box theater, no set, no lighting, no nothing, just the other people. And so their emotional axis in the scene is not distracted by anything. It's just that other actor, They have that with each other. That's all they need. That's all actors need, is an emotional reality to play within, And they love that too, because we're not stopping to lay the dolly track or to get the sun to the right position or get all the extras into place or, get all the hardware back to one and get ready to go again. We just roll. Okay, all right, let's do it again. Let's go back to one. Let's do it again. And we just get into a session. Sometimes we'll record for 10, 12 minutes straight, maybe 5, 10 takes, different ideas. Hey, why don't you do this? I'll throw them a line on the fly. It's a very creative sandbox, and the actors really love it. Either that or they're very good actors and lying about it for years on end. The key to it was to shoot really underwater and really at the surface of the water, so people were swimming properly and they were taking their own weight to get out of the water properly or diving in properly, and it just looks like that. It looks real because the motion was real. And the emotion was real, because these kids are having to learn how to be underwater. They don't know how to be underwater. They were raised in the forest. And so, their fear factor probably helped. Although everybody was very, very well trained. And we used a very safe and systematic way to allow them to dive. They were all scuba trained, but we didn't use scuba. We just did that so that they got used to being underwater for long periods of time. And we went to Hawaii and we got everybody on scuba, but we were also doing free diving training at the same time. It's all little details that add up to a fantasy character. We just want you to believe they really exist. I mean, of course we don't. You go into a movie theater, you're being transported to a fictional fantasy world. But the more you can suspend your disbelief, the more fun it is. I think people want to suspend their disbelief. They don't want to sit there and pick away at it. They just spent whatever it is, 16, 17, 18 bucks to go have an experience. They're leaning in, So there's a kind of almost a contract between the movie and the audience. We're all just gonna join hands and skip off to Pandora together, and it's gonna be fun. I don't think the audience gives you brownie points for making what they think of as photography look like photography. It doesn't work that way. You don't get extra. You only get dinged if you don't do it. But you don't get any bonus. It doesn't make it a better movie in their minds. What makes it a better movie is the people, the characters, the creatures, the things they're seeing, the things they're experiencing. But if they can let go of their disbelief, like, did these guys go to this other planet and shoot it, in that handheld documentary style? I feel like I'm really there. It's all working at a subliminal level. It's taking away the disbelief. And if they believe in it and they invest in it, now it's up to the story and the characters to work on the audience's heart and mind. It was such a change from working on Titanic, where she was quite experienced at the time but she had never been on a film of that scale. So it was all a bit bigger than her, a bit overwhelming for her. She did a masterful job, obviously, but on this film, she'd been around the block and done enough movies, and she came in and she spent 2 or 3 days watching how it was all done, and then basically started producing the scenes. But it was fun. I welcomed that, and it was we found it both to be not only a great working relationship and the creation of a very strong, memorable character, and she enjoyed all that, but almost like the freedom to be in a different body, to have a tale and to have a way of walking and moving. And Kate has she's got quite a presence in the film. She's not really like anybody else in the movie. Maybe Neytiri is the closest, because they're both very strong kind of alpha characters, and of course they clash for that reason. And that was fun. Watching them meet and clash is one of my favorite parts of the film.
I mean, what better acting school than with Sam, Zoe, Kate, Sigourney, Cliff? I mean, it was great, and I was always a sponge on set. Every day that I came in, I'm like, what can I learn from these people who are so incredible? I remember one time I knew that there'd be this really big scene with Kate and Zoe, and I made sure that I was there that day, and I snuck on, and I was really quiet, and my eyes were wide, because it's magic when they're acting with each other. What can you do but not just look and learn? I loved playing Sadaya. She's so warm and kind and open to anyone and all people, and she really loves her family. And when they tell her to take care of the Sully clan and teach them about the water and the way of water, she's like, let's do this thing. And I loved playing her. Before working on Avatar, I didn't have much acting experience besides 2 scenes in a short film. So it was it's like I was learning to act through mocap. And that's all I knew. And I'm really grateful for it because I kind of learned the hard way first, which is imagining almost everything around you. Fortunately, we have a screen where we can see what Pandora kind of looks like an unfinished version of it, so I can use that as a reference. But when I'm acting opposite Britton or Kate, I'm looking at a gray box, and I had to imagine all of that. And Jim, before we did any scene, he would explain how we should feel and the stakes and everything that was going to be in the scene before we do it, which helps so much because I knew exactly what I should feel, exactly what I should react, exactly what I am seeing around me.
I'm really proud not only to be involved with a film that I think will be part of cinematic history, in terms of what it's doing and its ambitions, but also in regard to what the filmmaker is angry about and what he's saying through the storytelling. I align myself very much with the message of the film, and hopefully through the kind of horror and the wonder of what you'll see, it will not only send the audiences out thinking, wow, how good looking is that captain? No, not thinking, wow, what an amazing thing to have just watched, but okay, let's sit down and have a little chat about this thing called the natural world. And every little decision that we make from the time we wake up and the time we go to bed, and what can we do? He's driven by greed. He wants stuff for him, and that's endemic of a lot of kind of powerful white men in society right now. And I have a backstory for him as to how he got to be this way, and how he just kind of removed his conscience, and he's now free to go out into the world and destroy whatever is standing in the way of him and money. And that's Scoresby, and that's got to come from shame and trauma. But right now, he doesn't care.
Jim has made it to where it's a beautiful place for all of us to be able to work and create our art and who we are as the rules. And if there's, you're walking through the jungle, okay, you're in a gray room, and he just talks you through it, and he immerses you into that world, and he shows you on the screen how beautiful it is, and he's in love with it, and you fall in love with it. And then he's like, hey, put some bushes there, put a rock there, put a sun there. Jim, we can't do a sun. Put a damn sun. Okay, we'll go get a piece of the sun, and then you're just in it, and you're in the world, and it's beautiful, and everyone's in it. Going into it, he was written in a way. Jim left it open, and we discussed this a lot, and he said he wanted me to put my own heart and soul into it, as well as stay true to sort of what it was written, obviously, which is, he's a rebel. He was sort of a guy who gets in trouble and all this stuff, and he's a screw up in that way. But he's also misunderstood, and he's an outcast, and he's alone. in the world.
So we have Tonawari, who's the Oloktan. Our tsahik of our tribe is Ronal, played by Kate Winslet. Then we have Aonung, our oldest son, and our daughter, who is Tserea. Now, we hold an important position in our village, in our reef village, and we have a lot of expectations upon us that we put upon ourselves and on our children around traditional conduct, about what is right and what is wrong, about our traditions and how we are to do things. We have a very classical approach to how we behave for not only our family, but for our reef family and our community, and for other reef and all of our cousins and brothers and sisters of the ocean. So it's a very highly organized society. As an actor, the worst thing you can be is self-aware and concerned about how you look and, you know, whether you're any good or anything like that. But this takes it to another whole level, because you haven't got any makeup, you've got no hair, you've got no pretty costumes or cool like props that you can, or sets, or, you know, it's like it's grey. You're in the grey mass. And so it all comes down to your imagination and your commitment to fulfill what's on a page in your own mind, and you just have to play. And it's one of the purest forms of play that I've ever done in my career. I've never done anything that is so that's so bare. You're really naked up there. And so you're only armed with this childlike purity to play and to imagine. Theatre's close to it. It's as close to theatre as I've ever been in front of a camera. There's nothing like it, really. And then when you look over on the screen and they've already got like a low resolution of what you're doing, and it's like, it is really mind-blowing. You just look at it, it's like magic. It's like, how are they doing that? You got the space station, like they're all the guys at the control center, and you're like going, how am I waving my arms around like this and my avatar's right there on the screen? It's just incredibly magical process. Yeah, like Jim does really treat us like his film family. You know, he does have his own family at home, and I don't know where he has time to do that, but he really does openly sort of say, no, I want to build a family. I want to come. He's not coming to work every day. He's coming to spend time with his film family. And he really does treat us, you know, within the scope of doing a production. You know, you really do feel a genuine connection there for the guy. And I think he needs that to get this done as well. Like, we'll go to where he needs us to go to get this done. It's a mammoth undertaking. It's huge. Kate Winslet is a legend, not because of her past work alone, but the way she just rocked in here, just picked up her character. She had to sing a song, I think. She had to prep everything. She had to be in the haka. She had to sing the song in Na'vi. She had to do breathe-ups, learn how to breathe up. She has these huge underwater sequences, which I don't have. I don't have any of those particular challenges. And she had to do it on this tight schedule, and she did it all, and she made it look easy. I know it wasn't easy. I know how hard she works, but she's a legend. She's amazing. She's she's a real force.
So my training for the role of Avatar, we started with like a lot of the freediving and the dialect, but more specifically on the dialect, since Spider's like a human, and he was raised until 4 by humans, he doesn't really have a Na'vi like accent, but he definitely can speak the language completely fluent. So I had to learn the language, but luckily for me, I didn't have to put on like a thick Na'vi accent, unlike, you know, Lowak or the other kids. But I still had to learn the language, and the Na'vi language, let me tell you, is hard. It is really hard. There's just so much there's so much different words that mean the same thing, but you have to use like those same words in different sentences if you want to mean like a slightly less, angry thing versus like a more angry thing. Like it's very confusing sometimes. It has been just like just a crazy life changing experience, because I like in a good way. I'm not the same person I was when I first got the role. Like the training has changed me, just like acting with Jim and just acting with all these people have just changed me in for the better, like because like I've learned so much more about acting. I've learned so much more about diet, nutrition. I've just I feel like my mind has been opened in a way for just like for Avatar, and I feel like I've just been like I don't know, I just feel like I've just been changed. So my training with freediving, I worked with Kirk, who's like the head freediving like coach guy for the whole freediving team, and he trained me in the cast for freediving, which is like holding your breath. So freediving, essentially what it is you go underwater and you're holding your breath while like doing certain movements underwater, like swimming or doing a fight scene, or if you're like looking for someone underwater, if you're under wreckage, but this whole time you're holding your breath. And the way that works is like he taught us to like months of training just went into like like laying down, and we just like lay down and we do like these exhalations, which is just like doing like really hard and short exhales. So it's like which is then you do that a bunch to get the carbon dioxide out of your system, and then you finally inhale slowly but surely, starting from your stomach all the way up until you can't like suck any more air in, and that's so that you have complete oxygen in your system, so you have the most efficient breath hold. But I mean that's the way it works. But yeah, we spent months training with Kirk and all the other stunt people, or like diver people.
When the Sullys get to Metcaina, it really shows the cultural abundance of the world of Pandora. Everyone, the idiosyncrasies of the terrain really expose how then these different tribes have developed a way of life. They live by the water. The Sullys don't need to hold their breath underwater. They live in the forest. Their deity is a tree. They are from a different way of life completely. So there is a lack of acceptance only through the lack of understanding of each other. And of course, Jake is infamous in the world of Pandora. His story is known, and to the leaders of the Metcaina, that is a very controversial topic, because they think the same dangers that he attracts will attract them to their front doorstep. Acting underwater was sort of second nature, given that we trained breath holds for a lot longer than we ever needed to film on. It was a very, very good tactically, because we would only ever do a scene like max 3 minutes underwater, and we would breathe up on a higher concentration of O2, which obviously helps you hold your breath a lot longer, and that was a godsend, because that was made the whole process a lot easier, and you're sort of lulled into a very meditative, peaceful state, and it actually made the filming of the scenes bleed into the preparation for the scene. You would have to spend, obviously, if you're holding your breath for 3 minutes, you'd have to do a breathe up for a longer time than that, and it would be the whole set was really focused and really together when we were filming underwater, because everyone respected what a commitment it was to be able to pull off such a task. So it was actually very cohesive, and you could feel the crew, and some of the cameramen had to go underwater as well and also do a breath hold. So it was a very communicative effort when we're filming in the tank. Neteyam, in respect to being the older brother of Loak, it's almost like the Cain and Abel sort of dissonance there of trying to seek approval of a father figure. I think Neteyam is very in tune to the culture that he's been brought up in, and he knows his dad is alien to it, and he's more at home than his father is, and therefore has his feet firmly on the ground, whereas Loak almost as a difference, sees this other world that his father's experienced, and takes a bit more joy out of that unknown. But Neteyam's trying to be the hero of the story, and given the world that we're in, he finds it impossible to do so, but also that's a classic trope of the coming-of-age story, which is amazing to see in this world, and I think the audience will find it extremely refreshing to see characters sort of like try to come of age within this environment.
So it's a very complicated process compared to most films. You have to film everything twice, basically, at least. And first of all, if you're filming in the set and you're talking to someone who's one of these 10 feet tall Na'vi characters, they're on another set just next door to you, and you have an earpiece and you can hear them speaking to you, and then sometimes someone's operating basically a huge puppet, and you look at the puppet and they've learnt the movements of the actor who's playing that character, and you interact with them. And sometimes they have what's called the Island camera, which it looks like something out of June. It's like a sports one of those sports cameras which are on the wires. It moves, but the movements are based on the movements of the actor who recorded the footage. So in the same way that they're I should not be the one explaining this. In the same way that their movements inform what the digital character does, it also informs what this Island camera does. I got a call saying James Cameron wanted to meet with me, and that's one of those calls that you have to do it no matter who you are. No, I don't know about that, but you basically have to do it. So I went, and I was very interested to meet James, and he told me a bit about the films, and he showed me a lot of the artwork, which is really incredibly detailed pictures of the creatures of the planet, as well as the Earth technology, things like this, and all the various ships and machines that the Earth people bring to the planet. But then there's all the creatures on the planet, and there's flora and fauna and animals, these aquatic creatures, which most characters are supposed to be an expert in. And it was really impressive, and just so much imagination had gone into it, and it was quite a long meeting of showing kind of the scope of the world and the films, and that got me excited about it. And also he talked to me for about an hour, so you basically got to do it. If you've taken up that much of his time, you got to do it, really. I'm glad I did it. It's really fun to do.
As Dad Sully always says, Sully stick together. I think at the core it's a family story, and that's part of what makes Avatar so special, I think, is its story and its heart. And yeah, the family, now Jake and Neytiri have a family, so they're not only protecting their planet, but also protecting their family. And often we find ourselves getting into trouble because we're trying to protect each other and stick together. And yeah, she's the youngest member of the Sully family. I don't think she sees herself as the youngest, though. She's small but mighty, and her family is the most important thing to her. Family sometimes does underestimate her, but Took doesn't underestimate herself, and she has fun proving them wrong, and I think her family is just really protective of her. And when she has her moments and she's sometimes a bit afraid, she also is really courageous and extremely brave, especially when it comes to her family, because she'll do anything to protect them.
It's not far off 20 years working with Jim now, and it's been a really interesting journey. Again, look, one of the reasons I like working with Jim is, he always strives to find the truth in things, and for me, that is everything. When you're trying to stand up visual effects or make people believe in an illusion, you have to begin with truth. So it's the same thing, and Jim, as far as world building is concerned, is all about that. It's like, well, how would that work? You know what I mean? So if you can drill down and understand how it works, well, now you can give it a place in the world. And that's true of, everything. 9 or 10 foot blue people on a planet, 7 light years away. You struggle with credibility as far as the emotion of a character. You're really trying to sell the idea that the soul is present. And I think that's compounded by the design, but if you can get your audience to go along for the journey emotionally, then the look of the character, not that it is irrelevant, it almost doesn't matter, in the sense that so long as your audience are on board, they're on board, and they can go on the journey. That's the key.
I don't think we could have done this as successfully without the underwater performance capture, because what the actors were doing is just coming through beautifully from the capture. And it's not just the capture itself, excuse me, it was their training and dedication. Like, they would spend a long time underwater each take, and they were natural. They became totally at home with it. And it shows, we get that weightlessness, we get that buoyancy, we get the movement that's struggling against the current or moving with the current, the changes in speed as you're going up or down, as you're breaking the water or diving in. We got a lot of that just from what the actors were doing with the capture. And it adds a realism to it that would have taken years to try to figure out and do by hand, because we would have had to do it by hand otherwise. Well, the technology, as in any aspect of filmmaking, is the tool that you use to create the art, right? It's the paintbrush. It's like, for us, it's like building your own camera to shoot the scenes that you want. Like, we're kind of at that stage of the technology. So you get all that under your belt to be able to create the experience for the audience. And hopefully it resonates, because we're all just big fans, of films in general, but also of this particular film. And we want to create something that we want to sit down and enjoy, and then hopefully everyone else does as well.
The biggest challenge for Way of Water has been just the sheer scale of it all. The size of these scenes, the reality of making each frame of this film not just photographic, but it just needs to come to life. Like, each frame of this you have to believe each frame of the film, the water, the characters, the detail. And we can get so much information in these frames now that you can't get away with some of the cheats we got away with on Avatar 1. There's just so much more information when you watch this, and when you watch it in stereo and high dynamic range, it's shocking how much information is there. So I think people would be blown away between the difference between the two films. Putting a live action element in it makes it much harder in a way, but it also makes it easier, right? Because any film image that you're grounding the image with live action, with a real plate, it actually makes the shot easier to believe. Because the second I see Spider in the shot, a live action like Jack walking through the shot with an avatar, I can believe that shot more, because you're seeing a live action element with our CG elements, and you stop thinking about the CG and you just look at the shot for the shot. Now, it's a lot harder because we actually have to do all the interaction.
On Pandora, in the first movie, we introduced audiences to a number of different creatures. As we move into the sequels, we're doing the same thing. There's one creature in particular called the Tulkun that is more than just a creature. It's actually an intellectual species. And the reason I say that is because it too can connect with Awa and download its memories, and it shares its experiences with the Na'vi. The Tulkun are 300-foot-long behemoths, peaceful behemoths of the oceans. They have a language that they speak that is unique. They have mathematics, they have music, they have song, all of these things. They have philosophy within their culture. And they have a very strong bond with the reef people. And the Metkayina each have a sister or brother that is their bond with the Tulkun. And that happens very early in life. And Renal, played by Kate Winslet, she has a Tulkun that she's bonded with. And it's a lifelong bond, and it's a kindred spirit that they share with each other. And they celebrate each other's families, the birth of a new child. They mourn the loss of a family member. And we see that in the sequels. I think when Jim writes a script, he writes it without the boundaries of what is possible. He writes it to tell the best narrative story. And then when you pick up and read Titanic, Avatar, or The Way of Water, you go, how are we possibly going to do this? The challenge at first is so daunting that you don't know. But that's what excites me about the process. And that's what excites the crew that we were able to pull together. When that character was created, the idea of Sigourney playing the younger version was the perfect fit. And performance capture, I have always said, gives actors the opportunity to play characters that they could not otherwise play. And Kiri's character and Sigourney's performance are the perfect example of that. When you see Kiri up on the screen, she is a 14-year-old young Na'vi girl in search of herself. And it's the performance given by one of the great actresses of our time. But she's playing that girl. And Sigourney went back and studied what she was like when she was younger. We looked at footage that Sigourney gave us in helping to design Kiri and still images, because for us, in a character that we create, it only works to have the performance come through if you're holding on to some of the facial aspects of the actor itself. And Kiri did this, and Sigourney embraced this idea. And to see her playing a 14-year-old kid when she was performing it, it was magic. It's what acting is all about. One of the things that was most rewarding to me coming out of the first Avatar was no matter where I was in the world, people identified themselves with the Na'vi. Whether I was in the Middle East, whether I was in South America, people would come up and say, the Na'vi, they are me. I see myself in that. And I believe in the sequels, people will see the same thing. What I am hoping audiences will experience when they finally get to see Way of Water in the theaters is something that makes them forget everything else that is going on in the world. That they are transported to another world, a world that they want to spend time in, but a world that they want to spend time with the characters in this story and learn from their journey how they in their own lives can overcome the challenges they face by the examples that our characters give them.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting going to Sigourney or Kate Winslet and saying, you know, here's what you have to do, right? Here's your scenes. This is what you're going to be asked to do, and you have this ability to do it, and you have the capacity to do 3, 4, upwards of 6-minute breath holds. You know, and in the beginning, it's like, yeah, sure. But then as you go through the educational process and you learn about the body, how it can change and adapt, what is actually possible, and then you start on that small little journey of making gains. You know, every session we train. And then there's this point where it kind of clicks. It clicks in a number of ways. It clicks in that the physiology starts to respond because of the training effect. It needed to look raw. It needed to look like it wasn't a familiar or a comfortable thing with them. But we gave them enough so they could have the skills to draw on, because that's the thing. I mean, it's one thing to act. It's another thing to act underwater, and then it's another thing to act underwater while you're holding your breath. I mean, most people say, hold your breath, and that's going to be 80% of their concentration. Well, how do you then say, now act and, you know, follow the script?